How's it going, everybody? Brian Alvarez and Dave Meltzer here. Wrestling Observer Radio, October 18, 2016. Figure4online.com/WrestlingObserver.com. A lot of news to get into here today, and we are going to kick it off with George St. Pierre. We'll get to Goldberg in a moment, but it's the only MMA story we've got today, and it may be a big one, maybe not.
It's big right now. The
sides don't agree on what's going on. George St. Pierre has claimed that he is free and clear. He is no longer under contract with UFC. UFC claims, no, you are under contract with UFC. And in a roundabout way, suggested there will be legal action if you attempt to do anything else. What is going on here?
Well, I mean, the thing is, he is under contract. The situation is that his belief is that the contract he signed in 2011 allows him to have sponsors. And they're saying that you can't have sponsors, so he feels that that contract shouldn't be valid. But he's certainly willing to fight, but he wants them to make up the money that he would make on sponsors. And I guess what happened, he was in negotiations with Lorenzo Fertitta. And then when Lorenzo Fertitta no longer owned the company, for whatever reason, WME, IMG wasn't aggressive in getting him. He was training. He was pushing the idea that he wanted to fight in Toronto. And I guess over the last week or two, it pretty much fell apart in the sense that he wasn't going to be able to fight. I think that they had, he said that they had suggested that he fight Robbie Lawler, but Robbie Lawler's not interested in fighting right now. And they said they were going to have a deadline and they wanted to be free agents. But the problem is, it's like, what exactly is being a free agent going to do for George St. Pierre? If he, let's just say, I mean, I know that there's the $10 million figure going around, and that's a lot of money, that he's asking. And I don't know that that's the number he's asking. I just know that Michael Bisping used that number. But I know the number he's asking is obviously pretty high, because if the number wasn't really high, they would probably sign him. But where's he going to get that elsewhere? I mean, like, everyone talks about free agency and everything, but it's like Bellator can't afford numbers like that. They might be able to afford, $250,000 for a fighter or something like that, but they're not doing pay-per-view. And even if they do pay-per-view, their ceiling is so low that they couldn't afford anywhere close to that kind of money. So it's, and George is 35, and if he wants to fight, he knows this. If he wants to fight, he has to fight now. So, pricing, it's a hard deal because George is very valuable, and I don't know if they see the value, because there's the value of how much money he will generate for them on a pay-per-view show, and it's hard to say what that number is. He's not the champion anymore, but I think the first fight back would do very, very well, just based on just being his first fight back, and he always was a big draw. And then after that, who knows? It depends on if he wins a championship, if he has the right contenders. You just don't know. I mean, that's one of the things about their system, where they don't necessarily have giant base salaries for these guys, but the top guys get a percentage of the pay-per-view. That puts, the company's never in jeopardy for guaranteeing too much in case the show dies, because the guys, they will with Conor. Conor's getting a big base, but with Conor, these shows where he's getting this big base, I mean, it's all but guaranteed that those shows are going to do big business. So they're not sticking their necks out. And with George, they're not willing to stick their neck out to that degree. And it's hard to say, when George was around, Canada was doing huge for MMA. They were doing bigger on pay-per-view for almost every show by per capita than the U.S. was. I mean, when we would see the list of the best pay-per-view markets per capita, I mean, those Toronto and Vancouver and Calgary and even Halifax and places like that were just huge markets. And it's no longer the case ever since George left. So does George coming back revitalize MMA in that country? I mean, maybe it does, because it's gone way down since 2013. So that he could be really valuable to them in ways that aren't easily measurable by the idea that, well, he generates X amount of money over average on pay-per-view, or we think he will. So there is that. But
let me stop you for a minute. I want to go back to the beginning because I need this clarified. He said, right now I am a free agent. My lawyer terminated the contract. Why did he say this if he's still under contract?
I don't know if his lawyer has the right to terminate the contract. It was signed years ago, and I don't know how many fights, but again, he probably had multiple fights left.
So is he confused? What's happening here?
I think that they believe that because they weren't offered a fight, that the contract should be null and void, and UFC believes differently. UFC believes that he still owes them fights on the contract. But at some point, if you go to court, if UFC is willing to pay him what his contract states, then in theory, he should be able to. They should be able to keep him until he fulfills the fights. But there is the idea that when he signed that contract, that he was going to get millions of dollars from Under Armour and whatever other sponsors he would get. And now, while he could still get that money, he's not allowed to get that money. So if you went to court over it, I don't know how it would be viewed. I could see it going either way. I mean, when it comes to weird contract things I've seen, courts don't understand the business of MMA. But they may understand the difference between, you're taking away sponsorship that this guy, when he signed the contract, would have. I would think that based on that, I would side with George on that aspect. But again, it depends on the writing of the contract, which I haven't seen, obviously. So I don't know, but the
I agree with you on all of this. I'm just saying that maybe this should all go to court first before you publicly announce that you're a free agent and your contract has been terminated.
Yeah, well, the problem is, and this is the big problem, is George is 35 and he doesn't have time for a court fight. Because if he says he's healthy and everything like that, but if he's coming back at 37 or something like that after, however many, it's 3 years now, if it's 5 years, he ain't going to be the same guy. He may not be the same guy now. He says he is, but he has to test him. You never know unless you actually fight where you are. You can do stuff in practice and everything like that, but it's not the same thing. I know of guys, just as examples, who have told me before fights that my lifting is up, my bench is up, or whatever. It's not necessarily bench, but my lifts are up, my speed drills are up. I'm doing better in sparring, because I'm eating better and this and that. And then I watch them go and fight, and they're either the same or sometimes they're worse. You just never know. And there's no markers. I mean, like training, it's an indication, but it's not a perfect indication because you're not under the kind of stress that you are in a fight, and you may get tired, and all kinds of things could happen. Obviously, Tom's probably a better person to talk to about this than me. But the point is you never know unless you're in a fight, like where your everything is, where you're really at. But yeah, I mean, that's the problem is that time's not on anyone's side. Because, I mean, yeah, UFC can wait him out, but the longer they wait him out, the less prime years he's going to have. And they're hurt too, because the best thing for UFC is for George St. Pierre to have 2 or 3 big years, or however many big years he can have, Canada to be built back up, them getting the big buy rates that George used to bring them, one more star, which, God knows you can never have, the real needle moving stars. You can never have enough of them, especially when they're running as many shows, and especially when they're in the financial situation that they're in. So it really behooves both sides to have him fight in Toronto, and that's dead, or have him fight as soon as possible and settle this. And this impasse is doing no one any good. And yeah, it can go to court, but that'll take years. And at that point, what are you fighting over? Because he won't be at that level anymore, and they won't make the money from him more than 1 or 2 fights if he's not at that level anyway. So they're both squandering great opportunities. So, I mean, like, I know a lot of people like, oh, George is a free agent. He can, go to Rising, but they can't afford the kind of money he wants. This isn't Benson Henderson, and this isn't Rory McDonald, and it isn't Matt Mitrione, where, they can make more money on the outside. There's nowhere he can't come close to the money that he can make on the outside. So free agency is not to his benefit. So we'll see what happens. But I don't know the actual demands, and $10 million is a lot. It really is. I mean, I'm not saying that they should, because again, if it's that money, that's a questionable number. If it's 6, it's not so questionable to me at that point. At that point, I think they should do it, but maybe he's asking more than 6. And if he's unreasonable, then that's the deal. And obviously they think he is, because I can't imagine them not wanting him. That makes no sense in the world. So, but I'm disappointed. He wants to come back. He's a great star. He's great for the sport. Always a nice guy and everything like that. I like George. I've been a big fan of his. And I would like to see him back, even if his fights aren't always the most exciting. I mean, he's a money player, and he really is a great person to have as far as a public figure for the sport, in the sense that, he comes across really well. He represents the sport really well. And, you want a guy like that on your roster as one of your focal point guys, as opposed to some other guys that are in that spot that, they're, I mean, even Connor, for all of his great drawing power. I mean, there's nobody like George. I mean, Ronda's not like George. John Jones is certainly not like George. I mean, it'd be good if they had one. You can use one, clean cut babyface, if you type of guy on your roster who can draw and who can be a national hero in Canada. I mean, there's always a spot for, there's a great spot for that guy. So I hope that they work out their issues, and today makes me feel like he may never fight again. And if he doesn't want to fight again, that's cool. But if he really wants to fight again, I think it's real sad if he doesn't, if he prices himself out of the market, or there's just some impasse that ends his career. And then he'll go back when he's, 45 years old or 50 years old and go, you know what? Maybe I should have fought. Maybe I could have won another championship, and I'll never know. And you don't want to be that. And he doesn't want to be that, because he's used that exact analogy. So I hope it's all worked out.